Welcome to the podcast. Today we're diving straight into something explosive. Race baiting, victimhood culture, and the way media manipulates us into seeing everything through the lens of race. Because here's the thing. Is everything really about race, or is that just what we're being taught to believe? Let's talk about it. Race baiting is when someone deliberately provokes racial tension to manipulate public opinion, whether it's for social power, political gain, or economic advantage. We see it in the news all the time. A story comes out about a conflict between two people, and the headline immediately points out their races, even when it had nothing to do with why they were fighting. It's about clicks, views, and keeping us divided. Because if we're divided by race, we're easier to control. Many Black individuals are taught directly or indirectly that they are victims, that the system is against them in every single way, and that no matter what they do, they will always be oppressed. But here's the thing, that mindset is disempowering. If you're always told you're a victim, how can you ever stand in your power? While yes, racism exists, it is not the cause of every obstacle you face, and thinking that way limits you. It traps you in blame instead of growth. I've been called racial slurs before. I know what racism feels like, but I also know this. Being a victim is a mindset. Just because someone hates you for who you are doesn't mean you have to carry that forever. You decide how you respond and what you build your life upon. Racism is defined as prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that your own race is superior. Anyone of any race can hold racial prejudice and believe they're superior to another race. That's racism, period. And moral superiority, that counts too. Some argue racism equals prejudice plus power, so only white people can be racist. But that removes accountability from people of other races who display hatred or prejudice. And that's not real justice, that's selective blame. People like to bring everything back to slavery, saying all white people are to blame. But let's look at history. Owning slaves was extremely expensive. Only about 8% of American families in 1860 owned slaves, and most of them were wealthy plantation owners. The majority of white people back then were poor laborers themselves. They didn't own people, and they didn't benefit from slavery. And did you know there were also Black slave owners? For example, William Ellison, a freed Black man in South Carolina, owned nearly 60 slaves by 1860. He was known not only for owning slaves, but also for being a harsh master. Ellison and other Black slave owners engaged in slave breeding practices to increase their labor force or wealth, treating slaves purely as property for economic gain. Why does this matter? Because slavery was an evil institution of economic exploitation rooted in power and greed, not simply race. Blaming an entire race today for something that a small group of elites, including some Black slave owners, did centuries ago keeps us divided, and division keeps us powerless. It's time to see history for what it was, a system of human ownership rooted in class, power, and economic greed. Race was the justification, but wealth was the driver. Systemic racism means that certain rules, structures, or historical policies disadvantage specific races, even if no one today is actively being racist. Despite its prevalence in political arenas, it is not as common as we've been led to believe. The examples I could find were redlining and the crack versus cocaine sentencing disparities. But here's what people miss. Classism is often the real root. Poor people of any race get screwed by the system. I grew up poor and white, with underfunded schools, no generational wealth, and no privilege for my skin color. I built everything myself through grit, decisions, and mindset. Classism affects everyone. Systemic racism layered onto that has hurt Black communities disproportionately, but at the end of the day, personal responsibility changes lives, not external blame. Maybe someone doesn't like you because of your behavior, not your skin color. Personal responsibility is powerful. Blame is bondage. What definition of racism have you believed, and does it hold up to truth? What would your life look like if you saw yourself as completely powerful, regardless of history or race? How does knowing the full truth of slavery, including Black slave owners, shift your understanding of history and power, and those who record it? Today, I choose to see people as individuals, speak truth boldly, and stand in my power without blame or fear. Thank you for listening. Share it, comment your thoughts, and make sure you're here next week for more uncomfortable truths and powerful clarity. Until then, stay rooted in your sovereignty.